to my party. We're just getting started. A life is a dream or a nightmare scarring.
You will hear a conversation between a woman and the librarian. Now you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. Now listen to the talk and answer the questions 1 to 6.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can I help you?
Yes, I'd like to join the library. We're new to the district, you see.
Certainly. Well, all we need is some sort of identification with your name and address on it.
Oh dear. We just moved, you see, and everything has my old address.
A driving license, perhaps?
No, I don't drive.
Your husband's would do.
Yes, but his license will still have the old address on it.
Perhaps you have a letter addressed to you at your new house.
No, I'm afraid not. We've only been there a few days, you see, and no one's written to us yet.
What about your bank book?
That's just the same. Oh dear, and I did want to get some books out this weekend. We're going on holiday to relax after the move, you see, and I wanted to take something with me to read.
Well, I'm sorry, but we can't possibly issue tickets without some form of identification. What about your passport?
What? Oh, yes, how silly of me. I've just got a new one, and it does have our new address. I've just been to book our air ticket, so I have it on me.
Well, that's all right. Your ticket will be ready soon.
Okay, how many books am I allowed to take out?
You can take 4 books out at a time, and you can also get 2 tickets to take out 3 magazines or periodicals. Newspapers, I'm afraid, can't be taken out.
Oh, that's fine. Do you have a record library? Some libraries do, I know.
Yes, we do. You have to pay a deposit of $5 in case you damage them, but that entitles you to take out 2 records at a time.
That's good. Could you show me where your history and biography sections are, please?
Yes, just over there to your right. If there's any particular book you want, you can look it up in the catalogue, which you'll find just around the corner. You can also find a touchscreen information service on level 2.
Thank you. Oh, and how long am I allowed to keep the books for?
Well, the normal loan period is 3 weeks, with 2 weeks extension.
Oh dear. We're going away for 4 weeks. Can I renew them now?
I'm afraid not. You must do that at the end of 3 weeks.
I see. Thank you very much.
Before the talk continues, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen to the talk and answer the questions 7 to 10. Well, let's go into some details. Your name, please, madam?
My name is Barbara. The surname is Cooper. It's spelt as Cooper.
Fine. And what's your contact number? If we have new books coming, we can contact you in time.
Good. You can call me on 723-6518, but it's better after 5 p.m. You know I have to work during the daytime. Do you need the office number?
I don't think so. It's enough. Could you tell me the address?
I lived in King Road, but of course you need my new address. It's 25 St. Mary Road, Hanwell.
That's Hanwell. Is that right?
Yes. Do you need the passport number? I just brought it with me. Here you are.
Yes, thank you. The number of your passport is G57980942. OK, and your ticket is ready. The number is M930123.
Thank you. Could I take a look around and check out some books?
Of course, as you like.
That is the end of part 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 2. Part 2.
You will hear a presenter on a radio phone-in show. The presenter is talking to a woman who was bitten by a poisonous spider.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Today, we're continuing our Traveller's Tales. On the line we have Amanda Toddington, who had quite a nasty experience in Australia last year. Isn't that right, Amanda?
Yes. My husband and I were on holiday and we were staying at a friend's house on the coast near Brisbane. It was towards the end of the holiday and I was about to go into the garden and enjoy my breakfast. I walked out into the kitchen, slid my left foot into my shoe and felt a tiny sting. It was pretty painless, but I shook the shoe off my foot and saw this tiny spider running out as the shoe hit the wall. Anyway, not being an expert, I presumed the worst, that I'd been bitten by something that was going to kill me, and I completely lost control. I don't think I've ever screamed so much in all my life. We'd been told beforehand to always check our shoes before putting them on, as it's a common way to get bitten. So I suppose it was my own fault, really.
So what was it that had bitten you?
Tony, that's our Australian friend, he immediately asked me if I knew what had bitten me, and I pointed to the corner of the room where I'd last seen the spider. He picked up a jar and found the creature in the corner where the shoe had hit the floor. "It's a redback," he said, and he gently placed the jar over the spider. The funny thing was, we'd been talking about some of the creatures we needed to be careful of a few days previously, and as he said the name redback, the conversation came flooding back to me. In particular, the fact that the bite can be extremely painful. I've found out since that the redback is from the same family as the black widow spider, and it's the female that does the damage, which it turned out was what I'd been bitten by.
You must have been absolutely petrified.
You can say that again. I remember feeling quite confused. I wasn't in a great deal of pain to begin with, and yet I could see from our friends' faces that they were concerned. Tony explained that the venom or poison of the bite spreads quite slowly, so the pain doesn't feel too bad at first. Gwen, Tony's wife, brought an ice pack, and Tony held it against the bite to make it less painful. Apparently, you're not supposed to put a bandage on the area, as this can make it hurt even more. Tony tried to put my mind at rest by explaining that this was quite a common bite, that the hospital would have an antivenom, and that everything would be okay. But I was beginning to panic. We were flying back to the UK the next day, and I really didn't know what to do.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
So what did you do?
Well, Tony phoned the doctor, who told him to check my symptoms for the next hour or two. As time went on, the pain became very intense, from my foot right up to my knee. My husband was on the internet and was reading out the possible symptoms. I wasn't feeling sick, and I hadn't yet developed a fever, but I had a terrible headache, and my foot was beginning to swell up. At this point, Tony decided to take me to the local hospital to be on the safe side. I really didn't want to go, as I had visions of being kept in for days and all our plans being spoilt. But Tony and my husband insisted. When we got to the hospital, I was relieved to see how casual everyone was when Tony explained I'd been bitten by a red-back spider. They told me to take a seat and got on with their work.
And did you receive any treatment?
By the time I got to see a doctor, the pain was very intense indeed, and I was getting quite upset. The doctor decided to give me a dose of an antivenom, which he assured me would eventually deal with the problem. Unfortunately, he also explained that it wouldn't have an immediate effect and the symptoms might last for several days. But the story has a happy ending. My husband managed to book us onto another plane 1 week later. And even better news was that the symptoms of the bite finally cleared up after about 24 hours. Within a couple of days, I was back to normal again. So thanks to the spider, we managed to extend our holiday by a week.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3. Part 3.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
So, what was it like in your school then, Lynn?
Well, South African schools are very different from schools in Australia. For a start, children don't start their schooling until they are 7, quite a bit later than schools in Australia. What about New Zealand, Gail?
We're more like Australia. I can't believe children don't go to school until they are 7. When do the parents get any free time?
Well, there's still the availability of kindergartens or play schools. It's just that formal education doesn't start until later. I don't think it's such a good idea for children to have to be too academic at such a young age. They should be able to just enjoy themselves.
Well, yeah, but the first school children go to isn't really very academic. It's just an opportunity for children to learn a few basic social skills by playing and learning with other children.
Yes, I'd agree with that.
I guess being so close, Australian and New Zealand schools must be similar then.
Well, I suppose they do share a lot of similarities, but there are also some differences. For example, children in New Zealand go through intermediate school, but in Australia there's only high school. That's right, isn't it, Pat?
Yeah, I think so. What about South Africa, Lynn? Do you have an intermediate or high school?
Oh, high school.
And now the difference between Australian and New Zealand education is that although both countries have state schools and private schools, our private schools are very often run by religious groups, whereas New Zealand schools are secular.
That's not true. There are quite a few religious schools in New Zealand.
Oh, OK, maybe we are similar.
Only a few South African schools have any religious connection, so I guess we're different. Most people go to state schools. Pat, is it true that some people from your country don't have to go to school at all?
Well, that's partly true. Because of the geography of Australia, there are a lot of children who do not have access to schools, at least on a regular basis. Instead, they have a form of correspondence education, where the lessons are actually on the radio and the students send their work in by post. That way they get a lot of what they would if they were in the classroom, apart from the interaction.
In New Zealand, not all students have to go to school either. Some parents have opted for homeschooling.
Oh, is that like correspondence teaching? We don't really have that.
Well, we do have correspondence schools, but homeschooling is different. With homeschooling, the parents teach the children and set them homework. They have to present a syllabus to their local education authority before they can do that, but it is becoming a more popular choice for some parents. I suppose it also suits parents' own commitments. I mean, they don't have to worry about collecting their children from school, and they can always teach over the weekend or in the evening if they want to.
Is the school day normally quite long then?
Not in New Zealand, but I think it can be in Australia.
Yeah, that's right. I think Australia is unusual in that there are extracurricular activities which you have to go to.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
These are normally sport activities, but there are a few other options.
We have activities after school for any student that is interested, but they aren't compulsory. What about in New Zealand, Gail?
I had to do some sport every week. I didn't really like it, but it was part of the school day, so I guess that's not so bad. Anyway, I spent 2 years at boarding school, so things were a little different.
Boarding school? What was that like?
Well, the thing I remember most about it was the strict dress code. There were restrictions on everything. You had to wear a school uniform almost all of the time, and it had to be cleaned and ironed. The length of your skirt had to be no less than 1 inch above your knees when kneeling down. Sometimes we used to go out on school trips or just at weekends with a few friends, but whenever we were outside the school we had to wear a hat. There was one teacher who always used to give me extra homework because my socks weren't pulled up, and that was in the school late in the evening. I suppose it wasn't that bad, but at the time it felt like a prison. I kept getting into trouble for something. Most of the time I forgot something, normally my school badge. We had to wear that all the time, in the school and out, because it had our house colours on it.
Wow, that doesn't sound like much fun.
No, but it was a good education, I suppose.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4.
In this section, you'll hear a lecture on coral reef. First, you have some time to read questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully to the lecture and answer questions 31 to 40.
Do you fancy diving in the wonderful world of coral reefs, green sponges, colourful fish and red crabs? It is a rich garden beneath the waves. But how much do you know about the corals? Are they animals or plants? What are the threats to coral reefs? Today, Mr. Tim Harford, Executive Director of the Coral Reef Alliance, is going to introduce the facts about coral reefs.
Good afternoon, everyone. Coral reefs are one of nature's most magnificent creations. It is filled with thousands of unique and valuable plants and animals. Over 1/4 of all marine species depend on healthy coral reefs. Humans also depend on coral reefs. These marine ecosystems are the primary source of food and income for millions of people, a vast repository of valuable chemical compounds and medicines, and a natural wave barrier that protect beaches and coastlines from waves and storms. Coral is actually the exoskeletons of coral polyps. Made from limestone, these skeletons build up over time, forming the reef. New corals are born each April. At a certain hour, on a certain night, mature corals suddenly release clouds of eggs and sperm into the sea. After the fertilized eggs take root on the seafloor, they can grow up to 15 centimeters per year. Coral reefs are present in the waters of over 100 countries. These are warm, 18 to 29 degrees centigrade, shallow, sunny regions primarily between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn. Only clear, warm salt water can support a coral reef. And because sunlight is crucial to the reef's survival, the water must also be shallow. The algae that grow on coral provide much of the coral's food. In deeper water, algae cannot get the sunlight they need to grow. Most coral reefs are in the tropics because natural conditions there are perfect. In their modern form, coral reefs have thrived on Earth for over 50 million years. In recent years, however, more than 11% of the world's reefs have been lost, with another 16% severely damaged during the El Niño event in 1998. Up to 32% of coral reefs may be destroyed by human activities in the next 30 years if we do not take action now. Corals and coral reefs are extremely sensitive. Slight changes in the reef environment may have detrimental effects on the health of entire coral colonies. These changes may be due to a variety of factors. One of the greatest threats to coral reefs is human expansion or development. As human population increases, so does the harvest of resources from the sea. Due to overfishing, reef fish populations have been greatly decreased in some areas of the world. The removal of large numbers of reef fish has caused the coral reef ecosystems to become unbalanced. As we know, corals are also very popular as decorations. A large amount of the most healthy corals are selected by commercial collectors. They sell the corals to souvenir shops, where a large number of tourists wait to purchase them as decorations or souvenirs. Coral reefs also receive much damage from both commercial and private vessels. The leakage of fuels into the water and the occurrence of spills by large tankers are extremely damaging to local corals. Although much of the coral reef's degradation is directly blamed on human impact, there are several natural disturbances which cause significant damage to coral reefs. The most recognized of these events are hurricanes or typhoons, which bring powerful waves to the tropics. These storm waves cause large corals to break apart and scatter fragments about the reefs. Home to a diverse community of creatures, coral reefs are underwater treasure chests of color and activity. Predators and prey swim and crawl among the coral in nature's never-ending dance of life and death. This lively, fascinating world beneath the waves is just waiting to be explored.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Welcome to my party, we're just getting started. A life is a dream or a nightmare scarring. Hand me a drink cause I think I'm going all in. Get me a shrink who can catch me when I'm falling. Cover up my scars, flip the handlebars, crashing in my car.